If a roller coaster passes every safety test, every inspection, with no cracks, no broken harnesses, no broken restraints, then why are the riders never alive when it comes back? That's the question that haunts me. And the answer is the reason the ultimate was never opened to the public. I've always loved roller coasters. To me, they're controlled chaos, machines that flirt with death, yet hand you back alive at the end. I studied everything about them, their history, the famous accidents, the myths, like the jet line in Sweden, where a train derailed after parts weren't properly tested, or the Texas Giant, where a woman's restraint failed and she was thrown from the ride. I collected these stories like baseball cards, each one proof that the line between thrill and death is razor thin. So when I became a ride operator at my local theme park, it felt like a dream job. But I didn't know then that one ride here had a reputation darker than any I had ever read about. It was called the Ultimate, a sleek black roller coaster, giant loops twisting like the body of a serpent. The park kept it closed, always closed. They test ran it often, the train roaring through its track, flawless every time. But when I asked about it, my coworker Markeisha told me flat,
"It'll never open. The boss says it's got a bug."
A bug? On a multi-million-dollar machine? I laughed at the idea, but she didn't. And when I pressed her, all she said was,
"You will see."
Months later, Markeisha and I were closer. We shared an obsession with thrill rides, often joking about the top 10 worst ways to die on a roller coaster. Mechanical failure, bad design, human error. We laughed about it, but looking back, I wonder if she already knew something more. One night after the park closed, she looked at me and said,
"Let's ride the Ultimate."
At first, I thought she was joking, but she was dead serious. She told me it had passed every safety check, that it was superstition keeping it closed. I hesitated, but the truth is, I wanted it too. I needed it. To conquer the forbidden ride, to feel what no guest would ever feel. She brought her friend Carlos along. The three of us met at the entrance, the black steel loops towering against the night sky. From far away, we saw the coaster already moving, an empty test run, or maybe not. As it roared past, Carlos shouted,
"Wow, that thing is awesome!"
We didn't know then that this would be the last thing he'd ever say. The moment finally came. Markeisha and Carlos were already buzzing with excitement, grinning like little kids about to sneak into a forbidden movie. I tried to match their energy, but something about the air felt wrong. Too heavy, too still. The ride stood before us like a shadow against the night sky. The Ultimate's black track gleamed under the pale glow of the park lights, its loops stretching up like claws, curling against the stars. It looked less like a roller coaster and more like something alive. I stepped onto the platform. My footsteps echoed too loud on the metal grating, like the place was swallowing sound instead of bouncing it back. "Last chance to back out," I muttered, forcing a laugh. Carlos just whooped. Markeisha shot me that smirk she always had when she wanted to dare me into something reckless.
Don't chicken out now. You'll get your turn.
I went through the motions of safety checks, pulling on their harnesses, listening for the clicks, tugging harder than usual. Everything locked perfectly. Too perfectly. The restraints didn't just snap shut, they sealed, like they were part of the riders now. Markeisha gave me a thumbs up. Carlos pounded the sides of the seat like a drum.
Come on, hit the button already.
he shouted. I hesitated, finger hovering over the glowing switch. And that's when I noticed something. The train was vibrating. Not from the engine or the chain lift. No, this was different. It felt like the steel itself was humming, a low, steady rhythm, almost like a pulse. I shook it off, pressed the button, and the train lurched forward. The chain lift clanked, dragging them slowly upward. Click, clack, click, clack. The sound echoed across the empty park, bouncing between shuttered food stalls and silent carnival games. As the train rose, their voices faded. At first, just excited laughter, but then nothing. By the halfway point, I couldn't hear them at all. I stepped out from under the operator's canopy to keep them in sight. The train crawled higher toward the peak. Marquesha's hands were in the air. Carlos was shouting something I couldn't make out. But the wind carried another sound down to me. Not laughter, not screams, whispers. A chorus of them, rising and falling with the groan of the chain. I spun around. Nobody there, just shadows and empty walkways. When I looked back, the train had reached the top. For a moment it hung there, frozen against the skyline like a silhouette carved in black steel. And then it dropped. The sound was deafening, the black cars streaking down the first hill like bullets. I caught a glimpse of Marquesha's hair whipping back, Carlos's hands in the air. Everything looked normal. But as the train entered the first loop, I saw something. Another figure, sitting at the back. I blinked hard, rubbed my eyes. I had personally checked. Those seats were empty. But now, there was someone, still, motionless, their head tilted down so I couldn't see a face. The train thundered through the loop, smooth as silk, but the hair on my arms rose like static. I tried to convince myself I was wrong, just shadows maybe, the lighting playing tricks. But as the train twisted into the second loop, my stomach dropped, because the figure wasn't alone anymore.
There were two more. And now, emergency crews carried their bodies away under white sheets. No alarms, no sirens, just a quiet efficiency, like it had all been rehearsed before. The next morning, the park gates opened on schedule. Families streamed in, music blared, and not a single word about what happened appeared in the news. It was like Marquesha and Carlos had never existed, but I couldn't forget. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that extra passenger, the shadow that shouldn't have been there. So I started digging. At first, it was whispers among staff, stories traded in hushed voices during smoke breaks. Some said the Ultimate had failed its very first test run years before I worked here, that a group of engineers had been on it. None of them walked away. Others said the track was cursed, that the blueprints were never meant to exist in the first place. I dug deeper. Old maintenance logs, blueprints shoved in dusty file cabinets, late-night internet rabbit holes. And that's when I found it. The Ultimate wasn't just a roller coaster. It was a redesign, a bastard child of something far darker. The Euthanasia Coaster, a theoretical design dreamed up by an engineer decades ago. A ride that would kill its passengers, not thrill them. 7 loops in a row, each smaller than the last, forcing blood from the brain until riders lost consciousness. By the end of the track, they wouldn't be screaming, they'd be dead. The design was never built, at least not officially, but hidden in those blueprints, I recognized details I'd walked past every day. The black steel arches,
The mirrored loops, the same sickeningly perfect math. The ultimate wasn't an accident. It was a shadow version of that forbidden design. Someone had built it here, quietly, and the deaths tied to it, covered up, buried, paid off until the paper trail disappeared. I remembered late-night conversations with Markeisha. We argued about that coaster. I always said it was the most horrifying concept ever imagined. She would laugh and say,
If you're going to die anyway, why not die on a ride? Terrific way to go, don't you think?
She said it with a smile. She meant it as a joke. But now, she had gotten her wish. When the train returned that night, and I saw Markeisha and Carlo slumped in their seats, I thought I'd already witnessed the worst moment of my life. But I was wrong. The police and medics came quickly, too quickly. They didn't ask questions, they didn't check the track. They just covered the bodies with white sheets, whispered something to the park manager, and disappeared into the dark. And I was left standing beside the coaster, the ride that had just murdered my friends. Or maybe something inside it had. The next night, I stayed after closing. I told myself I wanted answers, but truthfully, I just couldn't stay away. The park was silent, the air heavy, the kind of silence that makes you hear your own blood moving in your ears. I walked up to the ultimate again. Its black steel rose above me, loops twisting into the night sky like claws reaching for the stars. And then I heard it, the click of the chain lift, the sound of the train climbing, even though I hadn't touched the controls. I ran to the operator's booth. The system was off, completely dead. Yet the train was moving. It climbed higher and higher until it reached the peak, and then it dropped, screaming through the loops faster, smoother, louder than I'd ever heard. And this time, it wasn't empty. I saw them, Markeisha and Carlos, and behind them dozens more. Rows of shadowy passengers, their faces pale, stretched into grins too wide, too sharp, like masks carved into their skin. Their hands jerked up in perfect unison, like puppets pulled by invisible strings. Their eyes, what little I could see, glowed faintly, a sick, dying yellow. The train looped again and again, and with each loop more figures appeared, filling row after row. By the sixth loop, the train was overflowing with them. People pressed against each other, faces overlapping, bodies twitching, jerking, shuddering like static. And then they saw me. Every single head turned in the same second, hundreds of eyes snapping to me, even while the train tore through the track at impossible speed. And then they screamed. Not a scream of thrill, but a sound like metal tearing, like lungs collapsing, a sound so violent it rattled my teeth. I tried to run, but the shadows didn't stay in the train. As it passed through the final loop, they started to spill out, arms stretching unnaturally long, hands dragging along the ground like broken marionettes. The train roared past, and pieces of them were left behind, crawling toward me. Markeisha was the first to step off. She looked exactly as I remembered her, except her neck was bent too far, her jaw trembling like it was barely hanging on. She whispered,
You sent me here. Now you ride too.
Behind her, Carlos staggered forward, his eyes hollow, his chest caved in, as though the coaster had sucked the breath from him forever. And then the rest came. Dozens of them, hundreds, passengers from God knows when, different clothes, different eras, park uniforms from decades ago, guests from years before I even worked here. All of them walking toward me, all of them broken. I bolted into the operator's booth and slammed the controls. The train was back on the track, empty again, waiting for riders. But the system wouldn't respond. Every light blinked red, every warning alarm blared. And then, the restraints opened, one by one, as though inviting me in. The shadows stopped moving. They stood there, circling the booth, their heads tilted, waiting, silent. And then, in perfect unison, they pointed at the train, every single one of them. My skin went cold, my breath stuck in my throat. It felt less like they were asking and more like they were commanding me. The shadows closed in, the booth shuddered as hands clawed at the glass, the sound of nails, metal, bone against steel. The only way out was the train, so I climbed in. The restraints slammed shut on their own. The system powered up, and the chain lift began to drag me up that first impossible hill. And as I rose higher, I saw them below me, Marquisha, Carlos, and hundreds of others, all smiling, all watching, their voices whispering, blending together into one sound. One more, one more, one more. And I realized the coaster wasn't haunted. It was feeding. And tonight, it was feeding on me.